Reimagining Success, episode 197. You're listening to Reimagining Success, the podcast where we help you reimagine your future, designing a life and career beyond the 9 to 5 that allows you the freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment that you've been dreaming of. I'm your host, Anna Lundberg. Now, let's get started on those dreams. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this month's Escaping the 9 to 5 interview. I'm here with Chloe Temple. Now, Chloe, I now forget how we met. I imagine somehow in the LinkedIn world, I believe. I don't know if you have better memory than I do, but nonetheless, really happy to have you here today talking about your journey. So why don't you start by telling us what you were doing before and what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is an amazing tool. I think it probably was through LinkedIn, but lots of different platforms. So in terms of before, I guess my background is retail and FMCG. So almost a decade buying. So a lot of buying and category management, which was quite fun. Managing your own kind of P&L, your own area. I felt a little bit like managing your own little business. And then I shifted into FMCG, supplier side, and the last role that I did there before shifting into what I'm doing now is heading up their category strategy team for a big pharmaceutical company called Reckitt, which manages brands like Nurofen, Durex, Dettol, which was fun during the pandemic, as you can imagine. And in terms of now, so I founded Popp about just over a year ago, and I now coach, facilitate, essentially to help people, both businesses and individuals, dive into what I call their pool of potential through both well-being and purpose. And so it looks like from an individual perspective, that's support. I've built a kind of program around strategic life design, helping people understand what their why is and build a life by design, essentially based on who they actually are. And then from a corporate or from a business perspective, I help teams really understand what well-being means to them as individuals and to develop build their own well-being. There's a huge gap within that space, which we can talk to in terms of people doing it particularly well. Well-being is massive scope. And so people are so different and it means different things to different people. So I've developed some tools that enable people to understand that for themselves in kind of short workshop series. And so that is what is lighting me up at the moment.
Love it. And it lights me up too. There's so much overlap and so many synergies with work that I'm doing too. And I love how you said people there, because I think we obsess about, is it B2C, B2B, who's our niche and so on, but you're right, businesses ultimately are people as well. So that's who you're working with. And how did you come up with the idea? Did you have a super clear idea when you left your job, I'm going to create Popp and I'm going to have this strategy and so on, or talk us through the actual transition?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's probably not the traditional route of leaving the 9 to 5, or I wasn't running from anything. I actually was in my dream job that I'd created, managing a team, leading a team that I absolutely loved the work that we're doing. I loved who I was working with. And but during the pandemic was hit by, essentially, it felt like a lightning bolt moment. I was hit by an idea, and I mean, I literally remember exactly where I was and how it happened. And I spent the next 3 days head down. My poor partner, we were away. We got away with our dog in nature and it was lovely. But I spent the next 3 days literally completely engrossed in writing essentially a 10, 25 year plan for what Popp is growing into. So yeah, it was an exciting moment, and it then felt like something I couldn't not do or couldn't not follow, rather than I had to. I didn't feel any way of kind of being forced out, and I tried to do both at the same time for a little bit. But yeah, eventually cut the string, burnt the bridge, as people talk about, and yeah, now that's my full focus.
I love that story because we had quite a controversial moment in our relationship with my partner when we were on holiday, and he still talks about now how I was sort of working the whole time, and it was the same. I was so excited and enlightened, but had this vision, and he'd never come across somebody who liked their work so much. You're supposed to rest on holiday and so on, which is also important. We can talk about that, but I love it when you have an idea like that that's so compelling. And because I talk about the reasons why you leave the 9 to 5 from the push perspective, as you said, maybe toxic work culture and so on, which you didn't have, but then there's also the pull, which I think we maybe don't talk enough about, that strategic life design, which in fact you're helping people do now as well, which is so important to draw you towards something positive. And in a way, it's almost harder to leave when you're in your dream job than it is to leave something which has many more disadvantages. You may know that this podcast is called Reimagining Success, and I talk about defining success. So do you think your definition of success has evolved, or do you think you're just addressing it in a different way?
Oh, for sure. So, I mean, my definition of success has evolved over my life, if that makes sense. And the business has been one component of that. My background, and partly why I'm so passionate about what I do now, is I experienced a decade of depression and anxiety, and it was a really, really tough time. There's years within that period that I genuinely don't remember because they were just so painful that I think my brain has been kind to me and has tried to kind of blanket over. And because it had come from that, one of the things that made me feel better, a coping mechanism, let's say, was actually working. And I became obsessed and addicted in the same way that some people are with drugs or anything like alcohol. I was addicted to work because it gave me some sort of level of validation or feeling that I was enough, or so many things were reinforcing that obsession almost with work. And there are often some kind of misconstrued definitions of what success looks like in that context. And for me, it was around promotions and growing and the next thing and the challenge and all of that. I was constantly challenging myself to grow and develop and move on to the next challenge. And so those measures of success for me were, am I being promoted? Have I got a pay rise? Those sorts of things. And I remember the day that I finally got that dream job that I described at the beginning, and I'd pitched it had been a kind of 6-month process of pitching to the business to build this team that didn't exist, and I got to create it from scratch. And it had been a 6-month process until I got that yes. I remember coming home when it was kind of finally announced and it was all out there, and my sister and partner was celebrating with some bubbles, and I was like, that's how we celebrate. And I remember thinking, why do I feel so rubbish? I've just got my dream job, I'm living by the beach in Australia, and why do I feel like this? Like, what's missing? And I think that was the realization for me that success was never an external thing. It's got to come from within, and that there is never going to be, whether or not it's starting a business, or there's nothing external to me that's ever going to be enough, not sustain happiness. Like, you might feel good for a day, a week, a year, if you're lucky that something has happened, but it doesn't last. So that was my realization around, actually, the more interesting thing to find and the more interesting definition of success for me is around fulfillment. And if I'm living, as long as I'm living in line with my purpose, which I've now spent lots of time finding, that's success.
And how are you finding?
I don't know what you.
Sorry, you're lagging a little bit. But I was going to say, how are you finding living that now in your own business? Because I found, and I find this very interesting, that we've kind of brought it with us to some extent. I have a lot of clients, we can kind of demonize the 9 to 5 and that achievement and the promotion and so on, and yet we recreate those same structures, and it's easy to get sucked into. We have to be the best-selling author on Amazon, and we have to have 10,000 Instagram followers and all these things. So are you finding that a challenge, that it's not just that, okay, now I'm going to be fulfilled and that's it, but it's actually the ongoing reinforcing that shift in mindset and the different definition that you've created for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it isn't that you wake up one day and everything's changed for you. That it's an evolution, and I think that's the exciting thing about life, is that we get to evolve and we get to become into the people that we're growing into. So um, there is a different, and we've talked about it before in terms of not those things that that baggage will just follow you into a different guise unless you actually deal with the repeating pattern is going to show up in a different way. And so for me, it's just that awareness of when I go too far into do, I'm not a human doing, I'm a human being. And when I center back to understanding, no, it's like well-being, and put yourself, calm and slow down, that's what recenters me. So it looks very different now, in that one of my biggest challenges is that work doesn't feel like work for me. I actually think of it as play and mission, and I love it and I enjoy it. And if anything, I struggle more with stopping because I'm enjoying it. And so I've got a lot of structures I have to build in things that support me to take that time off. For instance, I'm taking August off, which is almost unheard of, to try and create that. And I don't like the word balance, but to try and create that space to make sure that I'm not just in the do all the time. I get to be in the be.
Isn't that interesting and ironic that we love it so much and then it's so hard? And I felt like early on I had that almost excuse, and I see it celebrated on Instagram. I love my work so much that I don't need to take time off. And I think we're missing a trick there, because of course there is, however important your mission in the work and however fulfilling and so on, there is still as you say, so many other aspects to you as a human being, your relationships, your interests, and so important to have that time off as well. So what other structures? So you talk about taking some time off. What else do you do in terms of maybe your daily routine or having supportive people around you? How do you develop the resilience, I guess, you need to keep going?
The biggest thing that helps me is the support crew. Like, my partner is unbelievable because he's so patient that he's a teacher, so he will get home really early, and he has structures within his work where he's off. And you'll know this as a mum, the kids appear like, kids feel like they're always on holiday, or certainly feels like he's always on holiday. So there's the structures that really support him. And I could look at that as, oh my gosh, you're tearing me away from the things that I love to do, and you want to go and travel Europe. Now we're here and not in Australia. Or I could look at it as, oh my gosh, thank you so much, because you're supporting me and encouraging me to look at different ways of doing things. So I have a lot of gratitude for both the space that he gives me to lean in when I'm in a period of flow and just go with it, but also no, let's go take the dog for a walk, and those sorts of things. From my perspective, it's really around making sure that I meditate first thing in the morning without fail, because that really grounds me. Small things like making sure I had a shower, because you can go through a whole day without showering, like making sure I have a shower at the beginning of the day. It sets you up for success. Small things can actually make a really big difference. It's just knowing yourself and what's going to work for you or for me.
And then from a sort of bigger picture perspective, more strategic, when it comes to your business and your business model, you mentioned a little bit about who you work with, but can you tell us more? How have you set your business up so that also you don't have to work late into the nights and weekends and over August and so on? So who are you working with, and what kind of services you're offering at the moment?
Yeah, the business model piece is a really interesting one. I spent the first 9 months from that moment of lightning bolt moment to actually leaving, all in conceptual. This is the business model that I'm going to have, and this is who I'm going to target, and it's going to be B2C, and I'm going to do it in this way, and la la la. That has evolved so much from doing, and I think you learn so much more by actually taking action and just listening into, actually, I really was energized by running that workshop. And that's essentially how I started moving or adding into what I do, the B2B piece. Was I missed, I love teams. My background is so aligned, and I feel so much, and also my B2C customer is, or the people I worked with from a B2C perspective, they're in corporate, they're in businesses. So it's mad to think that that for me at that moment, that I felt like I had to choose, but I didn't. So in terms of the structure of my business model now, I work with both B2C and B2C, and I love the synergies of both, because it also gives you a pipeline into potential people that you can support and help. They might not be in a place that they want, they're ready right now, but 2 years down the line, who knows? And they come back in terms of full circle and say, actually, I really want to know what my personal purpose is, etc. So I guess my piece around business model is it is an iteration, and how it's currently formed, I don't necessarily believe that it will always look like it is now. Someone says something along the lines of like, fall in love with the customer, not the product. And fall in love with the problem, essentially, the customer and what they're serving, rather than how you go about doing it. So I'm not in bed essentially with the business model as it's currently structured. If there's a better way of doing it, then I'll explore that. But yeah, it's working at the moment.
Yeah, amazing. No, that's a powerful way of thinking about it, because people tend to come and say, oh, but should it be 12 weeks or 6 weeks? And should it be group or individual? And should it be in person? And that, as you say, almost doesn't matter. It could be any of those, in fact, or all of them. But think about who you're serving, what would help them. And above all, and I think you're on the same lines, but many people forget that piece. What would you enjoy? What would make you come alive as well? Because that's just as important. And as you said, I'm such a fan of visions and strategies, but you'll never know until you actually bring it to life and you actually put it out into the world. So there's an element that you do need of planning, but ultimately you just kind of have to go out into the world and then see where it takes you.
For sure.
And what about, so you mentioned, obviously, a lot of people feel a bit lonely when they're working from home, but especially, of course, the last couple of years have been particularly challenging. So I love that you're thinking of how you can design your work to still work with teams and so on. And what about a marketing piece? Because again, a lot of people say to me, oh, Anna, I don't want to be on Facebook, and oh, I hate it, feels so icky selling myself and so on. So how are you feeling about going out there with your mission? Again, we met on LinkedIn. So how do you feel about putting yourself out there, as they say, with this new mantle, I suppose, of popp and your own business and your mission?
Yeah, I think the way that you look at it changes the way that I feel about, or the way I look about it changes the way that I feel about it. I used to feel very icky around it, and very uncomfortable about self-promotion. It felt very, oh no, it's not about me, and it's not about me, it's all about them. And it was very out of comfort zone. And I've never wanted to be a center of attention. But there's an element of, you just have to get over yourself. And if you really want to help someone, then you can't help people if they're not aware of you. You can't help people if they don't know that there's a chat, that they are experiencing a problem. So it was sort of get out of your own way and get out of their way. In terms, I'm all about impact, so I'm all about helping people, and if I'm standing in the way of helping them by not raising awareness that I've got value to give them, then that's a challenge. In terms of how I go about doing that, I've had different success or different enjoyment of different marketing models. Like, I invested an enormous amount of time and energy and emotional energy into Instagram, and I really did followed all of the things that people say you should do, like showing up every day and posting and all this. I tried it all, and it was really tough. And then I also started to and the more it felt like it wasn't working, the more I lent in to try and fix it, make it work. And then suddenly I realized, you know what? If it's not working, just step back. What is the worst that can happen? Nothing's gonna fall over if you don't show up on Instagram every single day. And my mental health, having the background that I've had, is my number one priority. I started becoming aware that it was impacting my mental health, and so I said, no, let's not. And I didn't go out on an Instagram and say, oh my gosh, this is my new plan, I'm not going to show up for you. It was just more, I stepped back like quietly from being so visible there. LinkedIn, though, I love. Like, I get to meet so many people. It's not perfect, but I get to meet people like you, build connections, add value. And yeah, I think the platform is fantastic for that. It's something actually that I would recommend to anyone, whether or not they're ever considering leaving a company or starting their own business or anything, is to start get over the whole icky networking is icky, or why should I add that person? They're going to think I'm weird. Get over that, because people are the lifeblood of they're the best. That's why we're here. We're social animals, and if you can use some of the social media platforms for good, then why not? And it's something I wish I don't have regrets, but it's something I wish that I had done earlier. And I continue to invest lots of time and energy into it, because it's rewarding. Not only finding potential clients and feeling like I'm helping, but also on a personal level, not feeling so lonely. Because as you know, because we're in a mentoring group together, and I share quite openly, I've really struggled with loneliness. Like, that's been the biggest unexpected impact of shifting. It's been quite a lonely journey. And what I realized recently was, there's essentially five people that people need in our life. We need coaches, we need mentors, we need friends, we need cheerleaders, but we also need peers. And my peer group suddenly went down to zero as soon as I left, because they're not necessarily, I didn't have that access to the people who were doing similar things on their own journey. So I've really consciously been building that up, and that has been really, really, really valuable for me. So LinkedIn has gone more than just the marketing tool, more from the support crew, or helping me create my own support crew, like I think we all should do.
Yeah, no, agree. And as you said, even if you're not necessarily thinking about changing jobs or starting a business, it's so powerful to combat loneliness, to engage, to learn. I love what they're doing. Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny, people get quite sort of sensitive about, LinkedIn's becoming like Facebook, and then others do love Instagram and get on really well with it. So again, it's about finding what works for you, right? And I love that you're able to then lean back, and actually the world didn't end just because you didn't post every day on Instagram, which is always good to remember. But it is tough as well, because leaning in is fantastic. That would almost be the right strategy to do. If something, you're leaning, you try even harder. And that decision as to when you stop or take a break or lean back is quite a tricky one, because we always, and I do, talk about persisting and consistency and so on. So it's a difficult balance there. And speaking of balance, I know you said you didn't love the word balance, which I don't either, but coming then to what I call flexible work-life integration, tell me more, what is it you don't like about balance, and how are you designing your work-life integration to work for you?
Yeah. Work-life balance I don't like as a concept. One, because it puts work before life. Which I already shared, that triggers some kind of personal stuff around what I had been doing, some patterns of behavior that earlier on in my life that had been not so healthy for me. So life work I prefer. There's also a kind of, is there a duality? Does there need to be a duality between the two things? Is your work, could your work not be part of life? So I have mental kind of challenges there. And then the word balance, oh my goodness, it's so it's almost setting you up for failure. Like it's like almost like you take one jigsaw piece out and everything's out of balance, and then that's terrible. For me, I mean, it's never going to be global, but I prefer a concept of like life work fill, meaning kind of fulfillment, and just really creating what that looks like for you and filling yourself up in your life, in your work with whatever that feel looks like for you. Or it could be fit or integration. I'm not prescriptive of the word, it's more around the meaning that it gives. And I've talked a little bit about some of the things already that I do to support me to find the right fill of work and life. And having a support crew around has been really, really valuable, creating those boundaries and creating time and space, and has really, really helped. But I think it's critical. And there's so many beliefs of, even within corporate, I work with a lot of people who will come to me thinking that they want to leave jobs, or to go to a different company, or they talk about toxic work environments, and they talk about that they can't manage it all. And actually there's a lot of beliefs that they're holding around what could be true for them. I know when popp had arrived into my head as an idea, like a lightning bolt, and I came back and I was trying to navigate both at the same time. I had lots of beliefs around, I was looking at parents or carers and thinking, oh, how lucky are they that they can take parental leave, that a baby is born and they're able to request kind of leave, or they're able to go into a kind of 4-day week, 3-day week. And I had lots of beliefs around, okay, well, that's not possible for me. And then suddenly I thought, why is that not possible? Like, why can't that be true? And ended up asking the business to go down to a 4-day week, which ended up being a 3-day week. And the business were unbelievably supportive. But I'm just of the belief that if you don't ask, you don't get. It's a Gandhi quote, I think, but it's for you to work out what that looks like for you. Because if, for instance, my boss had come to me and said, Chloe, I think, would you like to go down to a 3-day week? I would have been like, oh my gosh, he thinks I'm doing a rubbish job. Am I not valuable for those extra 2 days? Whereas actually that was probably what I needed, and it was incredibly helpful to give me balance. I'm doing air quotes around the word balance, because I know I don't like it, but if he couldn't give that for me, he couldn't tell me what I needed to ask for it and help him understand. So I think there's opportunities for all of us to actually understand, well, what's going to help us enjoy and get the most out of whether or not we're in our life, or whether or not we're in our work or mission, or I could talk about that all day, Anna.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you. I know. I'd love to, and we'd have a whole separate session on that. So much to pick up on there. I suppose if there's one piece of advice you could give to someone, perhaps who, like you, has this amazing idea that they just feel drawn to, but perhaps they're a little bit nervous about pursuing it, or who doesn't feel that they have that life work fill at the moment, based on, and I know you have a lot of valuable exercise and things you do, but what's the first step that people could take if they're a bit worried about taking a bigger leap? How could they start moving in that direction?
I think for me, the foundation of everything is awareness. Is the more that you understand about yourself and what you want. There's 3 questions I think we all must ask. Who am I? What do I want? And how am I going to get there? So many of us will just jump to the how am I going to get there? Let's say the promotion or whatever it is. They avoid the earlier questions, which are harder. So who am I? It's quite a big question, and you're not necessarily going to come up with a fully formed answer. But the more that we know about ourselves, the more that we're able to set ourselves up for quotation marks success. We're able to design our lives or our careers, or that align with what we look like at our natural best. So what I recommend is to build your awareness of yourself and to trial and test things to see what's going to be working for you. It's unreasonable to suddenly think that we're going to know what we want unless we try it. And that can be really, really small scale. It can be thinking, oh, actually, it might, I might perform better, or I might feel better in the rest of the day if I go for a run in the middle of the day. That might not work. That's just one strategy. If you don't try it, if you don't ask, then you're never going to know. And it's just around removing those beliefs, and then also removing or finding the courage to ask the question, like developing that courage. And I've got a resource actually that could be helpful on my website, which is chloetemple.com/resources, which is called like a pitch like a pro. I think it's the fourth free resource that people can download. And that's really about supporting people to have those conversations. What do you want? Is it coaching that you want? Is it mentoring? Is it a 4-day week? Is it you want to have the middle of the day free to go for a run? Some people find those conversations really difficult to have. And so that resource I pulled together to help people. Actually, I've heard so many pitches in my life from being a buyer. I was like, okay, right, bring that all together into one that enables you to get clear on what you want, but also the other party.
Yeah, because we really do hold ourselves back. I say the same, that we put the how before the what, and we can figure out the how, we can get the help, we can clarify that. But if we don't even know what we want, then, there's no point in saying, oh, that's never going to work, because we don't even know if that's something we want to pursue. And as you say, also projecting the no onto someone else. I always think, let them say no, and then you can make the choice to leave that employer or change something, but at least ask the question. And in order to ask the question, of course, you need to know what that question is and what it is. But I suppose in a way we're lazy. I don't want to be judgy, but it's easier to blame circumstances and other people and on my job and my boss and so on. Whereas actually, as you say, the hard work, but also the exciting and empowering work is to ask ourselves, who are we? What do we want? What do I want? And that is hard work, but it's so exciting and it opens so many possibilities and opportunities for us.
Yeah. And I think there's also not only laziness, like it's around fear. Like we're often afraid to kind of unpick what that looks like. So, I have a lot of people come and say, I want to be fearless. And I say to them, it's not about eradicating fear. It's around like, how do we work and lean into that? And you talked about that earlier, but leaning into that discomfort, because the more that we do that, the more our comfort zone grows, and then we start to fear less rather than be fearless.
Yeah. And one of the metaphors, and you've probably come across it too, but when we talk about the metamorphosis of the butterfly, you always hear about, it goes to sleep in a little cocoon and it wakes up and it's a butterfly. And then years ago, I came across that actually it's this really painful, disgusting process of breaking down into mush and protein soup and then gradually reconstituting itself and so on, which I find just so fascinating, because you're right, it's rude of me to say that we're lazy, because it is a fear, and it's well justified, because we're shaking the very foundations of our identity, and especially in our society where our identity is so heavily linked to our job as well. Changing and even beginning to ask those questions can really create a very shaky foundation for ourselves, and also by implication the people around us. So it's not to be I don't mean to in any way undermine or sort of whatever the word is I'm trying to find to make it sound super simple. But I love that you said, even just going for a run at lunchtime, or just changing, your habits in some small way to sort of question if there is a different way you could do things. So I love that.
Yeah, and that analogy is amazing, in the sense that also if you release the butterfly from the cocoon by cutting it, if someone else was to externally do that, that butterfly doesn't survive. Like we expect
that's a great addition to the metaphor.
Well, we expect that things are supposed to not be painful, but actually pain, like a decade of depression, 15% of my life, if I lived to 80, I wouldn't take back a moment of that, because that pain has shaped me into who I am. And yes, I would love to make people's lives better and less painful for less duration, but it is all serving us if it's working for us. And so that struggle is for something. I love that analogy. Or metaphor. I'm glad you brought it up.
And so what's next for you? What are you excited about now coming up in the next stage of your business?
So I am leaning much more into supporting businesses around wellbeing workshops. You were mentioning earlier around like really listening into what gives you energy, and that gives me so much energy, and the feedback that I've had from them all has been unbelievable. And I think wellbeing is so pivotal. Yes, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but our lives completely shift if we really lean in and tap into and understand what well-being, and that I was talking about foundation, but what well-being means for us. So lots around that. And I'm also writing a book that brings essentially that IP and all the lessons I've learned along the way, as well as I'm a big reader like you, Anna. So a lot of the wisdom that has come from the many mentors that I've had from authors, bringing that to life through a book. So those two things are keeping me very busy at the moment. Very
busy, but very exciting too. And yes, I mean, I think when this episode comes out, if you're listening, there is an episode on creating your own IP from a few weeks ago. So that's a really important one, because it's such a great way to crystallize your thinking, to establish your expertise, to give yourself all that rich content. And well-being, yes. And interestingly, I'm leaning into that too. I think coming from the corporate world, and maybe, as you said, what you call more the traditional reasons for leaving. To be honest, I loved my work and so on too. I certainly wasn't in my dream job, but I didn't have any sort of horrible place to exit from. But nonetheless, I rebelled against that corporate world, and sort of B2B then can be a bit sort of, you're a bit resistant. Oh, I know I want to work with individuals, but I love the things you've talked about in terms of, it is individuals ultimately. And if that's what gives you energy in that context, I think that's something that's important for people to recognize if they're feeling that they can't do that, because there are ways to make it work for you as well. So you mentioned your website there. Remind us, where can we find you? Where's the best place, perhaps on LinkedIn that we talked about, but how can we find out more about the work you're doing?
Yeah, I'm highly LinkedIn, Chloe Temple, you'll find me, chloetemple.com. I also, as I say, popprovides.com is the business as well. And you can find me on Instagram. I'm still there at Pop Provides. But or just shoot me an email. I'm sure that you'll leave the details in the show notes.
Yeah, will do. Chloe, it's been such a pleasure, and also for me to hear more. It's always selfishly my favourite part of these interviews is hearing more and learning as well. So thank you so much for your time and your vulnerability and sharing your story, and best of luck. And I look forward to working with you as well in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna.
If you'd like to create your own transition story and escape the 9-to-5 to work for yourself, then come and join us over in the Business Incubator. This is a comprehensive online program and community designed to give you the roadmap that you need to help you figure out what you really want to do, come up with a workable plan, and take the right steps to achieve it. Read more and join us over on onestepoutside.com/9-to-5. That's onestepoutside.com/9-to-5.